For 100 years, the car industry was built on a simple promise: slow, steady, and reliable. But that entire world, that entire rulebook is being completely torn up. Today, we're going to dive into this new reality, looking at it through the eyes of an industry insider to see how the whole business of making cars is being rewritten at, well, lightning speed.
Fast fashion. I mean, that's a pretty wild way to describe a car, right? But this one single idea is the key to understanding absolutely everything that's happening. The slow, predictable world of car manufacturing that we all grew up with, yeah, that's gone, and it's been replaced by something much, much faster.
And the scale of this change is just staggering. I mean, just think about it for a second. We're moving from a world of 5 to 10 year product cycles to a model that feels more like making a smartphone. Those predictable long-term contracts that were the bedrock of the industry, they're being replaced by these high-stakes, rapid-fire orders that leave the entire supply chain just scrambling to keep up. Now, how do we know all this? Well, this whole perspective comes from someone who saw it all happen from the inside, and her journey deep within that automotive supply chain is absolutely crucial for us to understand this new world. Our guide for this is Maureen, and she spent 2 decades right on the front lines of automotive purchasing. She was sourcing components, she was managing these massive relationships for one of the world's largest suppliers, which gave her the perfect vantage point to see this change happen in real time. And to really get why her perspective is so unique, you have to understand her position at a company like Magna, a Tier 1 supplier. This means she wasn't just, buying nuts and bolts. Her company was designing and delivering entire systems, we're talking transmission controls, complex electronics, directly to the big car brands. She had a bird's-eye view of the whole industry, from top to bottom. And that experience gave her a front-row seat to one of the biggest geographic and strategic shifts in modern manufacturing, a shift that's being driven by geopolitics, by tariffs, and of course, by the relentless pressure to build things for less money. Okay, so the big buzzword you'll hear everywhere is nearshoring. And for the US auto market, that really means one place above all others: Mexico. It's become the new frontier for manufacturing, all driven by a desire to get around one major obstacle. The strategy is actually a pretty straightforward workaround. So Chinese suppliers, they get hit with these high US tariffs, which makes it super expensive to ship directly. So what do? They just move production. They set up massive factories in Mexico, and by manufacturing there, they can ship right into the US, tariff-free. It's this enormous industrial pivot, and it's all happening right on America's doorstep. Now you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, didn't the new trade agreement, the USMCA, try to stop this? And you're right, it did tighten the rules. It now requires 70% of a car's value to come from North America, which is up from 62.5% under the old NAFTA rules. But even with these tougher rules, the trend is actually accelerating. And a big reason why is because the new EV players are demanding it. And this isn't some vague preference. It's a direct mandate from one of the industry's biggest players. Brands like Tesla are flat out telling their suppliers, we do not want parts made in China or Taiwan for our North American cars. So what does that do? It forces these suppliers to build entirely new factories in places like Mexico or India, which puts just immense, almost unbearable pressure on the entire system. But look, this pressure to move factories, it's just one part of a much bigger, much more aggressive strategy that is completely remaking the EV landscape. This isn't just about where cars are made anymore. It's a completely new way of doing business. The tactics being used here are, well, they're unlike anything the traditional industry has ever seen. Chinese EV makers will literally take a price from one supplier, walk it over to a competitor, and say, beat it. They demand that suppliers eat 100% of the upfront costs for development and tooling. And instead of 1 or 2 suppliers for a part, they'll have 4 or 5 competing against each other at the same time. On top of that, they have a really high tolerance for errors, basically using huge amounts of money to rapidly buy the experience that legacy automakers spent decades acquiring.
And a key difference that's fueling all of this is how government support works. So in the US and Canada, subsidies are usually given to you, the consumer, right? It's a rebate to make buying an EV more affordable. But in China, the government subsidizes the manufacturer. And what that does is create this absolutely brutal, hyper-competitive domestic market where dozens of companies are fighting for survival. And that in turn drives down prices and speeds up innovation at a truly shocking rate. So when you put it all together, the extreme supplier pressure, the manufacturer-focused subsidies, this whole new playbook, what do you get? Well, you get a staggering price advantage. The result is a brand new electric vehicle that can be sold for as little as 1/3 the price of its traditional competitors. 1/3. It's incredible.
This new reality, this new world of insane speed and aggressive pricing, it raises a really urgent question for every other car maker on the planet, from Detroit to Germany to Japan. How on earth can anyone keep up? So when our insider Maureen, the one with 20 years of experience watching these supply chains from the inside, when she was asked this very question, the one that's on everybody's mind, her answer was about as direct and unambiguous as you can get. Absolutely. And look, her confidence isn't just a guess. It's based on witnessing firsthand their relentless pace of development. It's their willingness to just throw out the old rulebook entirely, and their ability to use their immense resources to just buy experience and solve problems through sheer brute force. And this whole situation leaves legacy suppliers in a truly impossible position. They're being forced to build these expensive new factories in Mexico to satisfy the car brand's demands, but at the same time, they're expected to deliver parts at the same rock-bottom prices they could get from their hyper-efficient plants in China. It's an absolutely unsustainable squeeze. Ultimately, what we're seeing is a fundamental shift away from painstaking, long-term validation to a model that prioritizes speed and cost above everything else. And that leaves us with a really critical question. In this new world of automotive fast fashion, what happens to the things we used to value most? Quality, reliability, and that feeling of knowing your car was actually built to last.